Thank you very much. So good afternoon to everybody, and greetings from Berlin in Germany. My name is Madeline Schneider. I'm Senior Manager at Adelphi, and I'm also a non-key expert to the Switch Asia SCP facility. And today I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present to you a study on addressing the circular economy in the housing sector. So I've conducted this study together with colleagues from Adelphi and colleagues from Development Alternatives, an organization from India. Next slide, please. And the next, please. Yeah. So before we get into the details of the study, first I would like to set the context why sustainable housing is relevant in the context of sustainable consumption and production, and thus in the circular economy debate. So during the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002, the Johannesburg Declaration identified SCP as one of the three overarching objectives of sustainable development, together with poverty eradication and the management of natural resources. Additionally, research conducted on consumption patterns and life cycle analysis has identified housing along with food and transport as a key area where consumption has the highest impact on the environment. So in these sectors, the consumption of water and energy, the generation of waste, and the greenhouse gas emissions affect and are affected by almost every single lifestyle domain. So within the context of SCP, and thus to move towards a circular economy, housing plays a critical role. So how people live, where they live, and how their living spaces are built all have social and environmental effects, beginning at mining. So at the beginning of the life cycle of a building, with the extraction of the raw materials for the production of the building materials, and ending with the demolition of the building at the end of its life cycle and the disposal of the waste. So given the magnitude of the urbanization process of Asian cities and also the changes of society's consumption patterns due to economic growth, it is fundamental to look at the Asian housing sector, as it has the potential to drive green and resource-efficient practices in the construction industry and provide sustainable development in the region. Next slide, please. So now we go into the study itself. Due to the relevance I've just mentioned, the Switch Asia SCP facility has commissioned a study with the aim to provide a comprehensive overview of the current state, trends and gaps of SCP in sustainable housing in Asia, and to identify critical issues with the need for further action. So in order to determine these critical issues, the study has examined housing along the 5 stages of the building value chain. So this is material production, design and manufacturing, construction, usage, and recycling. So besides these life cycle stages, also overarching topics such as affordable housing, district development, and the country's NDCs and SDGs underpin the analysis. This in-depth assessment has been performed for 10 focal countries, which you can see in dark blue in the map. And they have been selected by the SCP facility due to their sector focus and priorities. In addition, further research on the current state of SCP in other Switch Asia countries has been performed, which you can see in light blue in the map. So now I won't be able to show you all different assessments along the life cycle due to the time limitations of the presentation, but I invite you to afterwards have a closer look at the study, and I will now directly go to the outcome of the country assessment. So next slide, please. Yeah, so with the help of a set of indicators, the SDP progress of the focal countries has been identified. So in this graph, you can see the overall country results as well as the scores achieved per category of the value chain. So please note that this assessment of the status quo was done in 2019 and can lead to different results when assessing at a later stage. But overall, you can see that the highest rating is reached in the life cycle stage of usage. So actually during the use of a building, followed by construction, which also corresponds to the scores achieved by Sri Lanka, which is the country with the highest total rank. So Sri Lanka ranks highly, for example, due to a number of progressive instruments. For example, it has a national construction policy with the focus on sustainable development. It has a presidential task force designed to encourage the visibility of energy efficiency in the residential building sector. And it also promotes water conservation through advertisements and school programs. India and Thailand, as you can see, rank closely behind due to national SCP policy in progress and an existing labeling schemes for appliances in India, and due to overarching policies to strengthen building codes in Thailand. But of course, also valuable lessons can be learned actually from the experiences of all countries, such as Malaysia, for example, which performs very good in the category of design and manufacturing due to its well-developed Green Building Council and Index and green material product directories. But of course, also areas for improvement have been detected. For example, the lack of effective policies in the mining sector or the lacking of standards to promote sustainable buildings. Next slide, please. So overall, what we see in this assessment is that considerable efforts in the field of SCP and sustainable housing have already been made in most focal countries, ranging from affordable housing programs, eco-city development and incentives for appliances to awareness-raising campaigns for energy and water conservation. However, challenges remain, especially in the area of material production and recycling. So that means at the beginning and at the end of the building life cycle. This is mainly due to a lack of policies for energy-intensive industries such as cement. Also due to a low uptake of smart mining practices, as well as the lack of reuse of construction and demolition waste. Moreover, existing standards are often not enforced or complied with, and financing options are rare, especially for lower income groups. Next. Yeah, just I think an error. Yeah. So in order to address these critical areas, which I've just mentioned, these barriers, so joint efforts are required to collectively discuss and promote holistic approaches that are able to trigger the scale up of sustainable housing across Asia to move towards a circular economy. So here in this table, you can see the priority topics related to sustainable housings that have been identified during this, on the next slide, please.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So here you can see the priority topics related to sustainable housing that have been identified. Which have not received much attention so far, but are critical to foster sustainable development along the whole building value chain. So, for example, within policy environment, specific climate objectives for energy intensive industries would be needed. Within technology, sustainable construction materials should receive more attention. Then relating to standards, as I've just mentioned, compliance and enforcement of the existing standards is crucial. And related to financing, special attention should be given to affordable housing finance. And these are just a few topics which I've just now mentioned. But as you can see, there are much more with the need for action. And as you can see on the right side, overarching topics are affordable housing, district development, and SDGs and NDCs that should always be addressed across all topic areas. Next slide, please. So I'm actually now already at the end. So thank you very much for your attention. And I invite you to take a closer look at the study through the following link. And yeah, you can let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.